this a little closer. I'm Kim Baird. I'm a proud member and former chief of the Tsawwassen First Nation, and I'd like to welcome all of you to traditional Coast Salish territory. I now do consulting work on First Nation issues, but tonight our topic is we desire a better country, and I think we better, because while Canada is already great for some of us, it isn't for all of us, and we need to change that. But what will it take, and how will we achieve it? My story is a very local story. I spent much of my life trying to make Tsawwassen First Nation a better place. And in turn, all my efforts led some to believe that I've made Canada a better place, which is in large part why I received the Order of Canada. I was part of a team that led change at a massive scale for my community. We are still undergoing rapid change, the most change we've faced since European contact. I led the negotiation and the implementation of a modern land claim agreement and self-governance. Our treaty is but one type of reconciliation model, and a controversial one at that, and the first treaty through the BC treaty process. We know this approach is not for everyone. Reconciliation is a hot topic these days. Why? Because when Europeans came to this part of the world, they did not deal with Indigenous peoples fairly or justly. It is irrefutable that terrible actions and systems against Indigenous people occurred, not least of which was the use of residential schools. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission came out with 94 recommendations on how this country should move forward. But we need to reconcile many things. In my opinion, we need to reconcile legal, social, political, and economic rights between Indigenous peoples of Canada and Canadians. We need to talk about this within our respective communities and with each other. This is not just for politicians, academics, and lawyers to address. We all have a role here. Tsawwassen was in the headlines last year about our project. People here would know what it is, the Tsawwassen Mills, a flagship economic project on Tsawwassen lands. Over 284,000 people attended the first 4 opening days last October, and there were some traffic issues. Yet, many people have said, what's the big deal? It's just another mall. Well, for us, it's not just another mall. It's our first economic project since the treaty. It enables better programs and services for my community. We have a beautiful park with sports field, lacrosse, and basketball court, and playground and fitness circuit. When I was chief, we had inadequate infrastructure, let alone these sorts of facilities that I dreamed of for my community, yet with no resources. Think about being in the lower mainland of Vancouver without access to proper infrastructure while we are surrounded by everybody else's infrastructure. And we are not a remote community. That mall required a sewer plant that will service the rest of our economic development projects because the regional and municipal governments refused to provide it to us. The water going to that mall was enabled by the treaty, wherein my community could no longer be legally withheld to water services that every city in the lower mainland benefits from. That mall project reflects 97% approval from my members who participated in a referendum. That mall reflects the compromise we came to when all parties agreed to the removal of the agricultural land reserve on those lands. Pardon me. That mall also reflects the land management jurisdiction that the treaty provides for, a jurisdiction that can't exist under the Indian Act. That mall could not have happened without our self-governance. That mall also represents our partnership with a preeminent North American commercial real estate company owned by a French pension. How Canadian is that? Who never built on leased land or worked with a First Nation before, by the way. The TransLink shuttle from our community to the mall was also enabled by the treaty and our integration into the regional district. The art in the mall is by Tsawwassen members, enabling a record number of commissions by a record number of Tsawwassen artists. This is a mini renaissance for our community. The revenues of the mall are also supporting our services to our members, a portion of which focus on education and wellness of Tsawwassen people. It also signals things that we are not so fond of, Some of the trade-offs in the treaty were not great. We're now paying sales taxes, and the need to pay other taxes in a few years is not enjoyable. There are other aspects of the treaty that are controversial and even offensive to many First Nation people, including myself. But this was our path to reconciliation, and we considered it carefully in spite of these trade-offs. And all of this was achieved through negotiations between my community and the federal and provincial governments, and through a long and deep engagement process within my own community. I had to ask my community to consider a 300-page legal document that modifies their Aboriginal rights forever and deals with highfalutin topics such as the constitutional status of our lands. But those legal rights weren't what my members were worried about. They were worried about our quality of life and our education. They were worried about creating better governance structures and getting the federal government and the Indian Act out of our lives. Out of all the things I'm proud of in my life, 4 things stand out. One is that 94% of my members participated in voting on that treaty, and 70% of them agreed to move forward with it. That level of participation took a lot of work, and the fact that so many of our members felt confident enough to participate is something I'm very proud of. Although we did not reach consensus, and this is difficult, a majority of us agreed to take this risk. And when I did my soul searching about our agreement, I had to consider, would this agreement work to make things better? I came to the conclusion that we would do a far better job of looking after ourselves than the federal government had done for 142 years. We took back our community 8 years ago. So while Canada celebrates its 150th, we celebrate our 8th anniversary of being included in this country. We are moving forward with our vision for a prosperous future and a comparable quality of life that many of our neighbors take for granted. We are self-governing. We have a vision for being part of a better Canada, a Canada that now includes us. The transformation we are seeing would not be possible if it wasn't informed by, driven by, and improved by my community. Our decision was our act of self-determination, and we would like others to establish their vision of reconciliation, even if the picture of how that looks seems quite blurry at the moment. The fact is, we must do better for Indigenous people in this country. The poverty is unacceptable, and Indigenous communities are crippled by inadequate and imposed structural barriers, the Indian Act just being one. We must find a way forward for all First Nations in Canada, as well as Inuit and Métis communities, and this will require uncomfortable discussions and an inclusive vision that reconciles our past to move on to a positive future. I've reflected about whether I should accept the Order of Canada for a number of complex reasons relating to my identity as a Tsawwassen woman in a country that has not been very good to Indigenous people. Also, I know I was only one of many that made the treaty happen, but ultimately I accepted that Order of Canada to illustrate an example of the opportunity for others to see the potential for this as a country that can be proud of, that we can all be proud of, and that where reconciliation is possible. I mentioned earlier 4 things I'm proud of. The other 3 things are my 3 daughters, aged 8, 10, and 13. And the fact that I have contributed to a legacy where they envision a future in this country wherein they can do or be whoever or whatever they want is a good start, in my opinion. They deserve the better future they desire, as do we all. Thank you.